Welcome, everyone. So today we will continue with where we left off last time. The thing is, we want to look at the context in which we need to understand where the Bhagwad Gita stands. One of the key things to understand is how is it placed in relationship to Vedanta. Now, we saw a bit of this in one of the earlier sessions. This is a recap, and what we will be doing today is kind of a crash course in Vedanta. So as you can see from this picture, we had the core text, the Vedas, and they are split into 4 parts, and Upanishads form the last part, and that is called as the Vedanta. And you will also notice that in a different branch of these works where the Bhagavad Gita sits. So what is the relationship between these two? And we'll get to that in a lot more detail, and you will see how the relationship is. And it actually makes a tremendous difference in what light you look at the Bhagavad Gita. So one thing that I had said earlier was that these works have been written in the language called Sanskrit. And it is a very developed language. And just like we would build on top of basic words in any other language, in English, for instance, you use the word logy. So you've got biology, which will be the study of animals, living things, and geology and zoology. Similarly, pain means itis. So we know these things. So we have got appendicitis when the appendix is swollen, or is in pain, conjunctivitis for the eyes, and so on and so forth. So you kind of concatenate words and you make new words out of that. So for Vedanta is such a concatenated word. And what the concatenation is Veda plus Anta. Anta means end in Sanskrit. So you can take different words and you attach the word Anta to it, and you get Vedanta. Or if you take Deha, like body, Deha is body. Anta is end, like I said. If you put those two together, it means death. So that would be Dehanta. Or if you take the 4 verses that, or the verses that make up a poem, they are called as pada. If you take the end of a verse, it will be called padanta. So this concatenation is used to build up this word. So Vedanta is the end of the Vedas, and you can see why it is called that. You can clearly see that Upanishads sit at the end of this Vedic text, and therefore it is called as Vedanta. So this Vedanta is made up of Upanishads, and Upanishads form a extremely important body of the entire religious text that you find in Hinduism. I do not really want to use the word Hinduism and color it with some language thing, because it is extremely scientific and it will never ask you to believe in anything, never take anything at face value or faith. It will ask you to experiment, experience, and then only make your decision. So I really don't want to color it with that word. But nevertheless, as we go and explore things will get more clear. And there are several Upanishads we saw in some of the previous sessions that I had. how they are distributed across the different Vedas. We are going to see a few of them in somewhat, or few texts in some of them in more detail, because they are far more relevant to how the Bhagwad Gita has been structured and organized. So we are going to see some specific verses of the Kathopanishad or of the Mandukya and understand what they mean and how they are related. And you will come to appreciate a lot more of the Bhagavad Gita with this Vedantic background. So the Upanishads, if again, they are broken up into two words, the Upa and Nishad. Roughly, they translate to somebody sitting close to another person, which, if one were to paraphrase, it means that you're taking a special class with a expert in a topic. So you read books, or you go to a university, you attend lectures with 20, 50 other students, and then you take special classes, one-on-one, maybe two or three kids more, and you are with a professor. So that's like a more detailed and close relationship with what is being taught or discussed. That's kind of at a high level what Upanishad means. So it's a detailed discussion on specific topics. And so you can see that the Upanishads, they pick a topic and they will delve into it. The Kathopanishad, there is a story of a boy called Nachiketa and the Lord of Death called Yama. It's a dialogue between the two. In the Brihadaranya Upanishad, there is Yajnavalkya, and there are several other people who talk to him. There is his wife, her name is Maitreyi. There are other people, rishis, who question him, Ushastha, Kahola, Gargi. Yeah. There's also a king, actually. His name is King Janak. He has questions that are answered in one of the Upanishads. So it's an interesting mix of things and perspective at looking at the core principles that are discussed. And this is a pretty old text, 5,000 years old. So when we are trying to understand this, analyze it, there are a couple of things that at least I kind of hold quite important, and I think that students of Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita and other texts should also hold. So first one is, who cares? Some of the things that are there. You need to have this attitude. You need to be able to draw the line when you get pulled into unnecessary things. And the second thing is, so what? Keep these questions to keep you honest, to keep us honest in the study of these texts. If something doesn't make sense, you have to be open-minded. It doesn't mean you just throw it out, but sometimes you just know that this doesn't make sense at all. So for instance, if somebody is having a debate over is this 5,000 years old, or is this 6,000 years old, or is Sanskrit derived from English, Latin, whenever it was done, because the word, for instance, the word divi and the word divine, they are kind of related, they close, they kind of mean the same thing. Or the word pitru, is like the word Peter, which stands for father. So there's some relationship between those languages, and it's a different stream of knowledge, if you will. We are not interested in that in this. We don't want to become scholars in knowing when, at what year was this written and who wrote it and how long is it. Who cares? This is the kind of time that you want to ask this question. Who cares if 5,000 years old or 5 years old? Does it make sense to you? Does it help you? That is what we are going to be interested in, and not about this. Who cares? And so what is the other question? The Upanishads tell you, or some text tells you that, God is this, this, and that. So what? How does it help me to lay that context? So these two questions will be asking on and off and try to keep us on track. So with that said, we want to touch upon some of the core principles. And this is a crash course. And just to talk only about Vedanta is going to take a long time. And we are going to breeze along some of the topics. And then we are going to touch upon them as time progresses in later sessions. We will focus on some aspects. But there are some basic definitions, and this is not unique to the Hindu system of thinking or the Hindu thinking principles. It's pretty logical. It's been done everywhere else. So there is a how is creation taking place? Assuming that there is a creator and then there is a creation. So the creator uses some material to use his thinking as a creation, and then putting those two together, you end up getting a creation. So there are two things that are in play here. There is the material cause, and then there is the efficient cause. So the efficient cause is the intelligence that is involved in transforming matter or material in some creation. It is a potter who takes a clay and uses his skills, his intelligence to create a pot. So these are like some basic definitions that are there. There is the efficient cause, and then there is the material cause. It is an important thing to keep at the back of your mind when we touch upon some of these topics in the later slides, that the material cause, the efficient cause, they shed some light upon how this creation was made. And one might be tempted to ask the question, so what? But hold your reins. We will get to that point. And even after that, if this question persists, feel free to throw it. So the potter uses his some design in order to create the creation, the pot. The potter is the energy behind this creation. He is using matter. In the case of a carpenter, he is using wood, and he creates a table, and he might create a chair, and he might create a ladder, and he might create a bunch of other things. Now, if you take a disconnected, aloof, unattached, detached perspective of this, one might say that all that is wood. A potter could make parts of different shapes, different sizes, different colors. But one might say that all is just clay. If I know what clay is, what the characteristics and properties of clay are, then if I know one pot, I know all the pots that this potter has made using this clay. Hold that thought at the back of your mind when we traverse through this journey, and you'll see that it plays a very important role in trying to understand some of the main teachings of not just Vedanta, but just in general life, why this is so important. So with that in mind, if you were to look at how creation has taken place, there are several theories, but let's go with one of them, which is the Big Bang theory, which is the most accepted and more popular ones. We don't want to break our heads over how this is mathematically done and what are the controversial theories around that, or some of the finer points of it that we are not going to get into. But creation was done, as we know in the scientific world, in the Big Bang. So there was a source of energy. The dimensions of this source of energy are unknown. One might say it's infinite. One might say that there is a good word that is used in physics. It's called the singularity, which means that there is a mathematical equation and there is a, you plug in values in it and it gives you an answer. But there are certain values that you plug in the equation and it becomes unsolvable. The answer doesn't make sense. That's a singularity. And a black hole in astrophysics is such a singularity. And we are not going to get into the details about astrophysics, but a real very high level view of what the black hole is it's a freak of nature where the density of that point in space is virtually infinite. What that means is that the matter has crushed some star into a very small point, and that is pure energy there. There was a scientist called Subramaniam Chandrasekhar. He had been able to show how if a star is 1.4 solar masses, it collapses into a black hole. Otherwise, it burns out as a red giant. The bottom line is there is this energy involved, and this energy burst out with the Big Bang, and it, in a fraction of a second, expanded, and it threw out gases, dust, and some of that dust coagulated to form meteorites and planets and stars as we know them. The point to understand here is that everything is coming out of that one source of thing. And therefore, you will hear scientists say that we humans are essentially stardust because we are born out of that one Big Bang that started whatever 4 billion years ago. They have even put a time to that, and again, who cares? So the analogy, the parallelism, if we were to consider, is everything is made up of that one thing. Just like we have got clay that is making up various parts, there is this core energy which 4 billion years ago set out and started creating different parts. And so we have got this earth part that has got me and you and other people. And all this is coming out of that one thing. It's just arranged in a different way, but it's at the end of the day just matter. So it's an interesting parallel that helps us to wrap our heads around some of the next topics that we are going to look at. And that is that the infiniteness that the creation is related to is not it doesn't start off like that. There is an undefined state after which there is this explosion of creation. And interestingly, matter needs to exist inside space. So therefore, space is generated. And if we look around, we are unable to put dimensions to space. Therefore, creation as such is infinite. You look around, you wherever as far as the eye could go, you can see creation. It doesn't end somewhere. And that is a very strange analogy that energy is also infinite. Why would you say that? If we are unable to measure something, it is undefined and it does relate some quality of infiniteness because of that. Therefore, the mind also, it has no dimensions. You can't measure it. You can't look at the height of the mind. You can't look at the width of the mind. It's infinite from that perspective. And if you go with this theory, it actually brings up some very, very interesting things. If you consider the mind as infinite, if you consider creation as infinite, there is a bunch of things that happen. And the Vedic thinkers, they captured this and they developed this theory in a very fascinating way. And we are going to look at that and why it's going to matter to us from a Bhagwad Gita standpoint. So the mind, if you consider this notion of not having dimensions, which kind of gives it this property of infiniteness, that also is true with matter, with energy, and really it also is true of matter. So if there is a creator who takes creation, some kind of matter to do his creation, there are a couple of things. If creation is infinite, then matter that he's using is also potentially infinite. And so is this energy. This energy is part of this manifestation. And if one were to consider this energy, there is this stark dependence. This energy in and of itself appears to be incomplete because it depends on the availability of matter in order for it to create. And there is this Vedic thinkers, they have come out with a very astonishing and wonderful way of looking at this idea. So what did they say? And this you will find in one of the many places, in some of the Upanishads, you'll find this, that just like a spider uses matter from itself to weave its web, the same way the creator or this energy used itself to create the creation. The minute you look at it from this perspective, it just gives a totally different dimension to our understanding of creation. If matter, if the material cause and the efficient cause are one and the same thing, then this stardust that we are made up of is also connected to this efficient, the intelligent cause that made up this creation. How are we going to believe this? Do we need to trust it? Not now. We don't have to. We don't have to throw it aboard either, because it's a very reasonable kind of line of thinking. Now, in general, Vedanta doesn't really speak of God specifically. But if one were to think of it from a God perspective, is he all powerful? If one were to claim he's all powerful, then his dependence on something outside, which is matter, to make this creation, that perspective stands challenged. Then he cannot be all powerful. Going back to one of our earlier things, we don't care, but it's an interesting perspective to look at things. So what is being said here is that creation and creator are both parallel. They are infinite and they don't cease. They, the place where they cease to exist is at the extremities, and both of them are undefined insofar as our perspective of knowing things, our yardstick of how things are known is known. Those things are undefined. It doesn't mean they are undefined. It's just that with what we know, with how we have defined things so far, we can't comprehend those things. That could be a different perspective where it might make sense to you. So this aspect of creation, where infinity just happens to be its nature, it's a key takeaway that Vedanta dwells upon when it talks about how it involves us in general in life. So how do these concepts, what kind of vocabulary is used in the Vedic text to transfer these concepts so they can refer to it? Now, note that in science too, we lean upon symbols to represent a lot of complicated things. So you might hear somebody say force F is equal to ma, and it actually, for somebody who looks at that, if it's a physicist, he knows it refers to these 10 books and what builds up to that. He's aware of it. If you show it to somebody illiterate, it won't make any sense at all. But you, in order to simplify, to build upon more and more complicated things, symbolism is used everywhere. It's not something very unscientific. It's just the way mind has invented techniques in order to understand complicated things and build on top of that. Like if I say endocrinology, it may not make sense to somebody, but who is in a medical profession, they just means whole different thing. There might be 50 books. Out of that, only 2 might be related to that. If I say something like a nephrologist, then you may have books on heart, you may have books on bones, you may have books on teeth, you may have books on the liver, and then you have books on the kidney. When I say nephrology, those who know it, they know he's talking about this book on kidney. Similarly, these core concepts that we discussed, they will be used in different terms. So we need to get acquainted with the vocabulary. So what is the vocabulary here? The energy that is responsible for creation is called Paramatma. And like I told you earlier, Sanskrit, it's a concatenation of different words. So this too is concatenation of 2 words, and we will touch upon this at the appropriate time. So there is Paramatma, which is the energy that created the creation. Jagat, which is the world, the Prakriti, the world in which we live in. And Jivatma is these individual people, you and me, that are in the world. This is just a high level definition. And if I were to take just one of these words, and if you go to some Vedantic classes, you might be studying this one word for 6 months about what Paramatma means and how it has come to be and what in reality it is. And we are going to just see what is relevant from the Bhagwad Gita standpoint of view. We'll be touching upon these terms. I am deliberately giving you this background so that when we talk about this later on, you feel free to come back to this session and see what this relates to, and you can remember it well and good. You'll be able to appreciate what's going on there further. So the just remember, this is a crash course. We are not getting into so many things. How this particular slide came to be. This is talking of very advanced topics, but they are necessary since we'll be looking at some of the takeaways from this. And this is a very wonderful speculation that the Vedic thinkers came out to be. They said that if the soul is infinite, you have a soul and I have a soul and he has a soul. If something is infinite, space is infinite. We cannot have two infinites. If something is infinite, then if there is something similar that's infinite, it is the same thing. This caused a lot of commotion. It still causes a lot of commotion. Some people almost take this to be sacrilege, blasphemy. But if an individual soul is infinite, and if another's soul is infinite, then they cannot be two. One can have a lot of interesting questions if one were to pursue this theory. And mind you, these obvious questions that come up, they are discussed and discussed at great length. Answers are provided, some of them very complex than others. And there comes a point when you would find that the person who is providing the answer, he will tell you that I know the answer and I can prove it to you, but don't waste your time on this. It's like you read a textbook where it says that we have got electrons revolving around the nucleus, the structure of an atom. The word atom is derived from the Greek word, where it was supposed to be the smallest indestructible part of matter. And we want to find the energy of the electron that's revolving around the nucleus, and the equation for finding that out, E is equal to h nu. H is the Planck's constant and nu is the frequency of radiation. And you might say, I don't believe you. Well, okay, then you can go back and convince yourself, go back all the way, find out how Planck came up with this constant, what is the theory of modern physics, what is quantum physics, how is energy related to frequency and all that. Or you can simply believe there is all these people who are using it. And I have seen experiments. I do experiments every day where I can see it at work. And so I don't want to go and study all this thing. I trust this. So there's some line that you draw and you begin to work with it. It needs to be reasonable. You don't want to have blind faith. And so this speculation that is there in Vedanta, where because of this property, if I can even use that word, of infiniteness that is associated with something, the concept. You cannot have two of those. Otherwise, this term too, you will find that it's being used a lot. It's a very very heavy word. You might even spend your whole lifetime. Uh, you will if you begin to just focus on what Advaita is, the books written on this, the scholars' opinion on this. It's like, when you talk about the theory of relativity, just as a sample example, it's there is a special theory of relativity and there's a general theory of relativity. And you might think that the special is special, but it's actually the other way around. Because the special theory of relativity is saying that this theory of relativity is valid only under the specific special conditions. Otherwise, it's not. And it took Einstein quite some time to go from the special to the general, which was really more complicated and more developed. Similarly, Advaita is this as a concept. It's weaved, it's threaded through the entire Veda, the Upanishads, and you can take away parts of it, and then you will find scholars who have tried to make us understand how that is being done, and even that is far too complicated. And we'll see. We will, just like the other topics that we have said, we will take whatever is relevant to us. So the what the thinkers of those times were also contemplating is, what is knowledge? Now, this word Om is a word that you will find being uttered in so many places, so many Hindu scriptures. It starts out with this word Om, Sahasra Shirsha, and so on and so forth. Many, they start out with Om, and Om has got lots of meaning. One of the meanings is that it represents this central intelligence. So, what is knowledge? And there is a whole branch of in the modern world, epistemology, where they study what knowledge is. And the Upanishads, they have come to some profound understanding of what knowledge is. And it is so astonishing, astounding, that they thought like this, and they came to understand the process of knowing like this. It's really mind-boggling that they did this. Now there are hints, there are slices of this definition spread across. The Kathopanishad has some, Mandukya Upanishad has some. What they claim is that knowledge is metamorphosis of the mind. And this is a big topic. I think that I'm going to pause this video for now, and I'm going to take this up in our next session. This is a very important topic about how we know what knowledge means. What is the relationship between knowledge, knower, and known? Some of the cornerstones, pillars of the Vedantic principles. And I would even say, in general, in life, this is a key concept to grasp. How do we know things? And then we can do something about it. So till next week when we meet, I will conclude this session and we'll take up from here. Thanks.